Good afternoon. Hello. Wow, it's a good turnout. Thanks all for being here. We're all here for the English talk, yeah? ¿Alguien está aquí por la plática en español? Oh, great, okay. we did this talk in the morning. I did this talk in the morning in Spanish, and there was a little bit of confusion, so okay, good. Everybody's supposed to be here. So my name is Terrell. I'm the director of Caminos de Agua. We've been working here in the region for about 9 years on mostly water quality and water scarcity issues. Yeah. And so here today we're going to talk about a very specific program, but we can get into some other issues a little bit later on that you may have. So to start off, I'm just going to go, sorry, the presentation's in Spanish. I didn't have time to translate it, but there's very little words on the actual presentation. It'll be mostly visual. But if you have any questions at any point for any reason, please feel free to stop me. But we're going to start talking a little bit about context, both national and state level context of water issues, and then get into the regional stuff, and that's kind of where we'll stay for the rest of the talk. The focus of this talk is going to be our water quality monitoring program. So it's going to be about water quality in the region, in this region specifically. Excuse me. And we're going to go deep on it. It's going to be a slightly more technical talk than we normally give. There's a reason for that, but if at any point anything's confusing, please stop me. I'm going to try to make it as manageable as possible. The reason is just to kind of squash any doubts, if there's any doubts about how we do our water monitoring in the region, and to assure that we are doing it to the best of our ability, and just explain to you how it's actually done, and then also explain what the actual levels are that we're seeing and what the impacts are. So I'm going to change the order a little bit than we normally do. I'm going to start off by talking about the human piece, the impacts of health, specifically of arsenic and fluoride, which are the two major regional contaminants we see throughout northern Guanajuato and also other parts of Mexico. What are the actual impacts on human health from those contaminants? And then after that, I'm going to bore you guys with a bunch of Mexican norms and data, numbers and things like that. But hopefully, again, it'll be a little bit more manageable. But we'll get to that part after the human health part. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our studies, how we do our studies, what they mean, how we do our measurements, and also the levels of contamination we see, not just in the region, but also here in both urban and rural San Miguel. I don't like doing these talks without talking about the solutions and what we can do about it, so there will be a point at the end where we talk about some of the solutions and what can be done, and then I hope to have a good amount of time for questions at the end. So before we get started, is there anything that you just have to get off your chest right now? Any questions, or are you guys ready to jump in? Okay. So starting off with national context, what's going on nationally throughout Mexico. Almost all of the water we use on a human consumption level comes from aquifers, comes from groundwater. Now those aquifers, about 60% of them are overexploited throughout the entire country. That, when we say it's overexploited, it means that we're taking out more water from the aquifer than is being recharged naturally, which means that the water tables are obviously going to be dropping. And with talking about recharge, we only see on average, about 2% of actual recharge, which means rainwater actually getting back into the aquifer for a variety of reasons. We don't have to go into all of it, but it's very, very low. And also what we see is about a 40% loss in leaks in the systems. In San Miguel, it's actually a little bit higher than that, but nationally speaking, around 40% of all the water we take out from the aquifers is lost. On the state level, Guanajuato is actually has one of the highest indices of water vulnerability in the whole world. We're at very high risk. 70% of all the aquifers in the state are overexploited, which means they're all depleting, which means the water's not going to be there at some point. And now we're going to go into the regional. I'm not going to talk just about San Miguel. I'm going to talk about what we call the Alto Río Laja Watershed, which is these 7 municipalities in the northern part of Guanajuato. If you can see, I don't know if you can read it, but that big water spot right down at the bottom of this little border is the Presa Allende, and that's San Miguel. And then there's 6 other municipalities that make up our watershed. Dolores Hidalgo to the north, further north to San Felipe, San Diego de la Unión, San Luis de la Paz, Dr. Mora and San Jose Iturbide. That's kind of where we're going to be today. We'll touch more specifically on San Miguel, but we really want to talk about this in the context of watersheds, because everything that we do here in San Miguel has an impact. Everything that happens in San Luis de la Paz can have an impact on our water resources here in San Miguel. All of that water is connected. So that's why we don't talk about it in terms of just the municipality. So what's going on in this region around the early 50s or so is when we started drilling wells. It's the advent of tube well technology. And so we started building wells. Again, all this data from here on out will be watershed specific, so these 7 municipalities in the north. At around 1983, we're close to about 1,500 wells in this watershed, thousands more at the state level, but 1,500 in this watershed. And you see a little point there that says 1983, the last Veda decree. What happened there is in 1983, there was a moratorium put on the drilling of new wells in the entire state of Guanajuato without federal permission. Because they knew as early as the late 70s, early 80s, that we were already overexploiting our groundwater resources. That didn't have much of an impact. Today we're going towards 3,500 wells in the region. So despite there being this decree that we have to drastically limit the number of wells, we keep upping the actual extraction. And here you can actually see the actual extraction. Pretty standard graph, it's just going up exponentially. And why? What are we using all this water for? It's not for us. Almost all of this water is being used by export agriculture, mid to large scale agricultural production throughout our entire watershed, almost all of it going to export to the US, European markets, and others. In fact, if we get a little bit closer here into San Miguel, and we look at just the registered wells in the municipality of San Miguel, we actually see that almost 93% of all of the groundwater extraction is for agricultural use. And so our impact, honestly, is pretty minuscule in comparison. That's where the water is going. So if we summarize all of this, what's happening? Well, the State Water Commission says that we're losing about 2 to 4 meters per year of our water table because it's about 30% overexploited, which means every year we take out 30% more water than gets recharged naturally by rainfall. So with that, we're losing 2 to 4 meters per year. That's an absolutely brutal level of overexploitation. And with that, we obviously have to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into our groundwater. Wells dry up throughout the region, and we have to keep drilling the wells deeper and deeper. Today, most of the wells we see are well over 500 meters deep. With that, we start tapping into old, ancient, what we call fossil water. So this water is mineral laden. It's been there for thousands or up to tens of thousands of years, taking up these different minerals and metals and things in the water. And unfortunately in our region, our underground, our subterranean geology is filled with arsenic and fluoride, and that's leaching into the groundwater. And so in a sense, it's natural contamination in the sense that it's coming off of natural rocks deep down in the water. But in another sense, it's not natural because the reason we're going that deep is because we're over extracting our water resources. If we were still higher up in the aquifer, we'd be taking out much fresher water, a couple hundred years old, with a few minerals in it that are probably good for us, and not as much arsenic and fluoride. But as it stands now, we're taking out very arsenic and fluoride rich water throughout the entire region. So getting into that, what are the actual effects of arsenic and fluoride? So we'll start with fluoride. Just so you know, these little orangish, yellowish specks, that's just for visual purposes. Fluoride and arsenic are completely invisible. They're completely dissolved in the water. There's no smell, there's no taste, there's no way to know if there's arsenic or fluoride in your water. We just use this again to visually represent it somehow. But fluoride, as you probably know, has a reaction with calcium, which is why it's in toothpaste and things like that. And so it builds up in our bones, in our teeth, and also in deposits in our brain. So what are the impacts? Well, it's first really important to say that fluoride is necessary for us. It's a necessary mineral for our bodies, and we need it. We do. And so at a very specific concentration, it's good for us. It is. We absolutely need it. However, what we see here are increasingly elevated levels of fluoride that begins to have the opposite effect. So instead of fortifying teeth, it starts to deteriorate the teeth. And what we see there first is dental fluorosis. We see it in rural communities throughout the entire watershed, right here in San Miguel as well. And this comes from excessive fluoride in the drinking water. All of these impact children far more acutely, far more severely, especially 8 years or younger. And we start seeing things like weaker bones, more cases of broken bones, and also deformities in the bones. It's called skeletal fluorosis, where the fluoride levels are so high and they start drinking it so young that during the development process of their bodies, their bones actually started to become deformed because of the excessive fluoride. And more recently, in the past few years, there's been a lot more studies on fluoride looking at the impacts on the brain, because we know it builds up in the brain. And again, almost all of these are very specific to children. You don't see these kind of impacts as severely in adults, or almost not at all. You don't really see dental fluorosis in adults, only if they're exposed when they're younger. But what we've been seeing a lot in recent years is difficulty in cognitive development and learning with children who are exposed to fluoride. There was a really big study done a couple of years ago. It was actually a 12-year study done in Mexico that linked, I won't say direct correlation, but there was a strong correlation to levels of fluoride and cognitive development in kids over a 12-year period starting at birth. This is what it actually looks like. This is a young girl here in San Miguel. The fluoride she was drinking was actually not high to what we see today. And then this is kind of what we're going to start seeing more and more if we can continue to consume fluoride at these levels, is the skeletal fluorosis, which is actually the deforming of the bones. Last year, we finally were able to participate in a public health study in the region, the first that I know of, at least, of its kind. It was with the National Public Health Institute. It was a very small pilot study, but it was looking at the impacts of arsenic, specifically more fluoride, in just a couple small rural communities based off of our water quality monitoring program. And they found that over 80% of the children already had dental fluorosis. I think it was children under 12, I'm not totally sure, but something like that. And 25% of the kids also had early indicators of renal failure, of chronic kidney disease, which is, we're missing studies, but there is a correlation. There's a tie between fluoride and chronic kidney disease as well. Again, but we're missing more studies on that specifically. Okay, arsenic. Once again, those red dots mean nothing. Yeah?
I need to know, before you go on, how much do the children drink this water? I mean, are they actually consuming this water, or is this through other means like agriculture, through foods that are being eaten, that are being irrigated through this kind of contaminated water?
Yeah, it's a really important question. All this is through consumption. So arsenic and fluoride, they're not absorbed through the skin very well. Like arsenic's like less than 6%, fluoride I don't remember, but it's really consumption. You have to actually be drinking the water. And even in crops that are produced with arsenic and fluoride water, missing a lot of studies and a lot of information, we'll get into it later, but more or less that's not the big risk factor. The big risk factor is drinking it. So we know that kids, especially in rural communities, also in urban San Miguel too, lots of kids are drinking the water. And we can see that on the teeth very, very prevalently. Thanks. So arsenic, where does arsenic go? So again, these little red dots, they're not really there. Arsenic, again, is completely invisible in the water, but it's just for the visual representation. So this builds up in all sorts of areas. We can actually measure arsenic in the nails and hair and urine because it builds up so much in there, but it also builds up in the skin, in the lungs, gastrointestinal tract, really kind of builds up in everywhere. And in contrast to fluoride, arsenic, there's no good level of arsenic. Arsenic is not good for us. We don't need it. It's not essential to us. It is actually just poison to us. So yes, we can tolerate certain levels, but really the answer is as little arsenic as possible. No arsenic is better. We don't need arsenic. Let's get it out of our drinking water. What does it impact? It impacts mostly everything. What we see physically are lesions on the skin, and arsenicosis is lesions on the skin, but it's also really prevalent in the feet and the hands, on the palms of the hands. It's this buildup of these giant lesions. There's also a really strong tie nowadays to childhood development as well, like fluoride and learning. There's a closer correlation to chronic kidney disease with arsenic. I don't know if it's closer, sorry, but there's also a correlation to chronic kidney disease. The big things that are associated that are very well studied with arsenic are cancers, specifically el bazo is gallbladder cancer and skin cancer are the two biggest cancers. There's also ties to other cancers, breast cancer, to renal, kidney cancer, and lung cancer as well, but the strongest ties are to gallbladder and skin cancer for chronic exposure to arsenic. Okay, so now we're gonna move into a little bit of the more public policy about what the actual norms are, like what are the regulations on arsenic and fluoride in the drinking water, and how we tie that to these health impacts. So please feel free to stop me. This is, arsenic stuff might get a little confusing. I'll try to make it as palatable as possible. So the Mexican norm for arsenic that is pumped into our houses is technically 25 micrograms per liter. The norm is written a little bit differently. They use milligrams. It's not super important. 25 is an easier number to remember than 0.025, so we'll say 25. That's what's permissible by Mexican law in water in the house. The World Health Organization has something else to say about it. They say that it should not be any more than 10. And almost every other country in the world is in accordance with the World Health Organization on this, because the more we learn about about arsenic, the more we realize that it's just not good and we need to be more aggressive with our arsenic norms. Mexico is one of the very few countries that has a higher standard for arsenic. That said, in 2015, Mexico came out with another law, with another regulation. And this one is in accordance with the World Health Organization at 10 micrograms per liter, but it's only for what they call water services, which includes like bottled water, water that you buy. So still the water that's pumped into your house can be at 25, but the water that you buy, whether it's bottled water or ice and things like that, sodas, etc., has to be in accordance with the World Health Organization. And just to show, there's other countries in the world now that are taking a much more aggressive approach to arsenic, because we've got about 40 years of knowledge out of Bangladesh about the just detrimental impacts of arsenic on human health. And there's new studies coming out all the time showing that this could actually be one of the biggest environmental problems that is affecting just hundreds of millions of people around the world. But because of that, you see countries like the Netherlands, who have 3 micrograms per liter. Consumer Reports in the US, that does a lot of work on this stuff, they're in accordance with 3, and more countries are trying to get the level down to 3 and trying to get the World Health Organization to lower their limit to 3 as well. But again, Mexico, technically speaking, for our purposes, 25, or the bottle of CL you buy should be at 10. Fluoride's a little bit easier. World Health Organization is at 1.5 milligrams per liter. Mexico is in accordance with that. So easy enough. Again, this other weird Mexican law about bottled water has a different norm as well for fluoride. At 0.7, if you're above 0.7, it just means that your product, bottled water, just has to say this contains fluoride on it. They have to print that on there. If their product is over 1.5, it has to say that this product is not apt for breastfeeding mothers and children under 7 years of age. So, any questions on the norms? Okay. So we'll move on. So getting into our water quality monitoring program, first I want to talk a little bit about the history, about what we know about arsenic and fluoride in this region. It's relatively, well, arsenic and fluoride tend to go together, and understanding these is relatively unique to certain parts of the world, and unfortunately we happen to be one of those unique cases. But way back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the UNAM Juriquilla, Dr. Marcos Adrian Ortega, did the first studies in this watershed looking at arsenic and fluoride, and was finding elevated levels of fluoride. I don't think as much as arsenic at the time, I can't remember. 2006, the municipal government in San Miguel, under the Department of Ecology, worked with the Ecosystem Sciences Foundation to do a study on all the wells in San Miguel, and actually published that data, which was really great. In 2006, it was under the old ecology director, Don Patterson, and found very high levels of fluoride throughout the municipality. In 2012 is when we came on the scene with Caminos de Agua, and we started doing our tests with Northern Illinois University at first, and we were part of a regional coalition looking at these issues, and we brought this in 2013 to an ethical tribunal to look at the essentially abuses of the human right to water in Mexico, which was passed in 2012. And then in 2015, we continued our work to this day with Texas A&M University, University of Guanajuato, Kansas State University, and NC State University. And to this date, we work with those universities, almost all of them still. We've tested close to 300 sites now, more than 400 studies throughout the region, in all 7 municipalities that make up the watershed, but some more than others, with these 5 universities. And now we work very closely with an independent lab, an accredited lab in Mexico, in Salamanca, called Eco Laboratorios in Salamanca. Okay, so how do we measure this stuff? Don't worry, I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to explain these. All I want to do is show this as an example. We published this paper that came out last week with NC State University, and all I want to show you here is that what we were looking at is field test kits for arsenic. And there's basically field test kits for arsenic, and then there's equipment that costs tens of thousands of dollars. There's not a lot of middle ground there. And basically what this study shows is that those kits are completely unreliable. They completely underestimate the levels of arsenic, given our water chemistry parameters in here, and they're essentially completely useless. And so it's actually giving us really bad information. So we don't use that information. We use more trusted information. So all of the information, all the data I'll show today was done with one of these 3 universities or with Ecolaboratorios, again, an accredited lab in Salamanca, using one of 2 methods. Most of them use ICP-MS, which is far and beyond the most well-respected or regarded way of testing arsenic in the water. Very, very reliable. And the other is AAS with Ecolaboratorios, which is just another way. It's a little bit more inexpensive, but it's also very trustworthy data. As far as fluoride is concerned, again, we'll be working with these universities using ion chromatography, which is just a really effective way of testing fluoride, I promise you. You can't get much better than that. And we also use our own lab here in San Miguel, the Caminos de Agua lab. We have a method of testing fluoride which is also very reliable and has been verified by all of these universities by doing comparison studies with them. So that's the data we'll be showing. No field data for us here today. So what's going on looking at fluoride? To date, we're, I think, closer to about 40% of all the sites we've tested are above the Mexican and World Health Organization limit for fluoride in the region. 105 sites, it's higher than that. This data is a little bit old, I apologize for that. But this is kind of where you can see it. This blue line here is that standard, it's that limit that you can't pass. And each one of these are almost all wells that serve communities. There's also urban data in here too. We'll break it down a little bit later. But this is water people are drinking, and you can see some of them is very excessive. But even these ones that are down in this level, we're going to see the health impacts very, very prevalently in children specifically. Yeah.
You're just saying drinking, you're talking about people who pump the water out of the ground, not the bottled water, right?
Yes, this is, sorry, we're on wells now. So we're on wells and urban taps. Yeah, we'll break it down a little bit, but we're out of bottled water. We're going to go back into bottled water in a second. But right now, we're just in our region. Here you can see, this is San Miguel down here. There's the Presa. You can see that we have quite a number. This is, basically urban San Miguel. A lot of that is definitely above the limit for fluoride. That's what all the red is. You see those black ones up there, that's San Luis de la Paz, about an hour and a half north. And that's a very hot corridor up there with very excessive levels of fluoride. Yeah?
You said well water and urban taps?
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right?
So, no, it's not.
Okay.
So essentially how it works like in a rural community is that most rural communities will have a well, and we want to get as close to that well as possible because that well serves the entire community. In San Miguel, it's different. In San Miguel, the well that may or may not correspond to your colonia is not going to really tell us what's coming out of the tap because Sapazma is mixing wells together. And so, and we haven't had access to those wells. And so I'll break it down in a little bit. We'll talk about urban San Miguel, but everything we've done in urban San Miguel is just from people's taps. We've never had access to the actual well heads. Everything that's outside of urban San Miguel is almost exclusively from the wells themselves, and those wells actually serve a population.
It doesn't get treated in San Miguel?
No.
It just comes straight out of the wells?
Yeah, no. Yeah, we'll get into it. They're really hard to treat. We'll talk about that in a second. But again, you can see kind of where we're at. San Miguel, lots of fluoride coming out of the tap. But up in the north, we have conditions even more brutal. When we look at arsenic in the region, again, we're about 40% of all the sites we've tested are above limit for arsenic now. This was not the case just 3 years ago. It was very low 3 years ago, and now we're seeing spikes in arsenic. We'll talk about that in a minute. If we look at this in legal terms, the Mexican legal norm, we're only talking about 10 to 11%. Because again, Mexico does not have an aggressive arsenic law. So take it for what you will. We like to talk in terms of public health, and we absolutely think that 40% of the sites we've tested are a public health risk. But legally speaking, not so much. Here we see it again. So this is the Mexican norm. This is everyone else in the world's norm, and Netherlands norm is way down here. But anyway, you can see that we still have a good amount that are above even Mexican laws by a good factor too. Some 4 times, 5 times above that. This is, again, old data. We have now a well that was 220 micrograms per liter, which means that only goes up to 140. So we're talking about 22 times above World Health Organization standards, or almost 100 times other international standards. And here we can see a little bit of the breakdown here. So again, you see that corridor up in the north in San Luis de la Paz, about an hour and a half north of here. We have a lot of problems with arsenic up there, and it's becoming more and more severe every year. We see here in San Miguel, we have a good amount even in the urban center that is above the World Health Organization limit, without a doubt. Now, nothing in the urban center, again, these are all taps from people's homes, has surpassed in our studies the technical Mexican limit for arsenic. You can go on our website and see these maps. That's just the watershed there, but we've covered a good section of the watershed. We still have a lot more to do. But you can click on any given point. This is the Spanish version. We have an English version too, though. And for instance, you can see this site. We've tested it, half a dozen times over the last since 2013, and it'll kind of show you how water quality has been at that site over time. You can do it with the urban center. You can do it with these community wells. There's something that says official reports there. You can click on those. It'll produce a report. Well, not all of them. We're working on it. It's a lot of work to get all that data up there. We have all the reports, and so if anybody wants anything, you can contact us. At some point, all those points will have reports that are tied to them, like in this case with Northern Illinois University or Texas A&M or Eco Laboratories or something like that. So let's get into San Miguel. You guys are interested in San Miguel, so we can look at, this is arsenic in San Miguel. You can see a good section of the urban center there has arsenic above the Mexican, or sorry, the World Health Organization limit coming out of people's taps. Once again, these are taps. We do have a couple wells here, and those two right there are substantially above the Mexican norm as well. So we're talking, this community over here is, I think, 7 times above the limit for arsenic, and that one is about 4 times above. But so there are some places close to San Miguel that we're starting to see really excessive levels of arsenic. But in the urban center, we're seeing close to double the World Health Organization limit, which is still below the Mexican standard. Good question. We'll get there right now, promise. Just real quick on fluoride. All those orange points means that it's above the limit. Red points means it's really above the limit. And black points, which are not in San Miguel, are really, really above the limit. But we see lots of orange in San Miguel. So, up to double the Mexican norm and World Health Organization limit. This is the highest fluoride limit we've registered in San Miguel. It's actually close to the Presa. It's about, a little over 4 times above the drinking water limit. So talking about urban San Miguel, again, they mix the wells. We know they mix the wells. We're working with Sapasma. They've been very upfront about that. They're mixing the wells to try to lower the levels of contamination. And so I'm only going to show you some stuff that we have for the last 3 months because honestly, it changes very quickly. There are certain colonias like Los Frailes, I think Guardiana, Los Balcones Atascadero, that don't seem to change much, but most of the other colonias seem to change very quickly on any given day. And so I'm just going to show you where we're seeing problems right now. Right now we're seeing problems in Independencia, San Antonio, San Rafael, Santa Cecilia, Las Ventanas, Atotonilco, y Cieneguita. Over the last 3 months, that's where we've seen the problems in San Miguel. And again, we've seen problems in other places, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, none of these arsenic ones are legally above the limit. They're all above the World Health Organization limit, except for one. And the fluoride is all above the legal limit, except for one in these cases. So why do we do this? So, obviously we want to know what's going on with our water, but it's also really good for us to look towards the future and to understand what's going on with our water. So this is just one quick example here, but this is a community that for arsenic was pretty high. It was right below the Mexican standard at close to 25 micrograms in 2013. We came back in 2018 and it was at almost 100. That's a 4-fold increase in 5 years, less than 5 years. That's an insane increase. And this is something now we're seeing all throughout the basin. So we're seeing, you see the light blue, that was 2013 to 2015, and the dark blue is 2016 to 2018. We're seeing 4-fold increase, 50%. We're seeing really massive increases in arsenic concentrations. So what does that mean? Well, it's actually an opportunity. Arsenic has a chronic impact on our health. So that means we have to be drinking it for years and in certain cases decades for it to really be correlated to cancer and things like that. This data, we've known this is only a few years old. So people who are exposed right now, they've been exposed likely for a very short amount of time. So this is an opportunity right now that we don't have an experience like Bangladesh, where arsenic levels got out of control and then now it's a public health crisis throughout the entire country and has been for decades. We're ahead of the problem. So if we can admit the problem and we can look at it, then we can start talking about solutions, and we can avoid the really terminal health impacts that are associated specifically with arsenic. If we leave this to not do anything, and we allow people to keep consuming this water and not changing it for the future. National level, we're part of a group. It's a partnership between the federal government, academia, and NGOs throughout the country. It's like a mechanism of collaboration, and we're looking at arsenic fluoride throughout the country. Guanajuato is a huge hotspot, some of the highest levels we've seen, but we're also seeing levels throughout the northern part of the country, in Durango and Chihuahua, and other places as well. Last year, this group, under the Secretaría de Gobernación, like I don't know how to say it, the governance secretary, at the federal level, published a book openly talking about the arsenic and fluoride issues that are really prevalent throughout the country right now. And so it's hopeful that people are talking about this and are willing at a federal level to actually be publishing about this. So to get to these questions about solutions, so this is why we're talking about arsenic and fluoride. Why don't we treat it? Because it's really, really hard. These are completely dissolved in the water. Again, they don't have any odor or taste or anything. They're very difficult to measure in the water, specifically arsenic. And again, they're just really hard to remove. You can't get it with any sort of basic filter. You just can't. You can't boil it out. Boiling actually concentrates the levels even more because you're boiling off the water and you're concentrating the minerals. You can't use chlorine. You can't use a standard filter. This is a Niken filter, which is pretty common in San Miguel now. That doesn't work. This is a whole house system that are commonly called whole house systems in San Miguel, where you go to a hotel, or maybe you have them in your own houses, where someone installs these systems with the giant blue things with the UV lamp on there. Yeah, it does not touch arsenic and fluoride, not even close. None of these systems can remove arsenic and fluoride or other inorganic contaminants, but think about Flint, Michigan and the lead crisis. It's because lead's also really hard to remove. And so that's why they don't remove it from the water here, because it's really hard.
Are you acquainted with Berkey filters?
Yeah, Berkey filters don't work either.
They have the white things that
Yeah.
supposedly get rid of fluoride and arsenic.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually adding that to the list. We did a study on the Berkey filters. Yeah, they don't work for our levels here. So they're really designed for the US, where they're adding a little bit of fluoride into the water and to kind of go down. We saw a 60% reduction, but for a very short period of time. Berkey uses what's called activated aluminum, and that is effective at removing fluoride, but you need a really low pH for it to be effective, and here we have a very high pH in the water. So not to get too techy, but we have very basic water with really high fluoride, and so
Stop using that for cooking.
you shouldn't use a Berkey to remove fluoride. It won't remove enough fluoride. No. Yeah.
What about RO?
So that's where we're going. What does work? So, great question. We've got two commercial options. We've got reverse osmosis inversa in Spanish, sorry, and we've got bottled water, which should be reverse osmosis. That's why it's drinkable, because they should be using reverse osmosis. Should be. We'll get there. So, reverse osmosis, yes, absolutely. It's very effective at removing arsenic and fluoride, all sorts of other mineral contaminants. Absolutely. You can get a household system here for a few thousand pesos. Great. Bottled water should be working, but we have a lot of experiences to say that we shouldn't be so trustworthy of bottled water. This is from a story in 2015 from La Jornada, where they shut down 40% of all the bottled water plants in Mexico City for not complying with the most basic regulations. We're not talking about arsenic and fluoride, we're talking about bacteria. They couldn't comply with the most basic water quality standards, and they shut down 40 of the plants in Mexico City. But let's talk about arsenic and fluoride. This is a study that was done at the UNAM San Luis Potosí by Dr. Dio Gracias, where she was finding levels of arsenic and fluoride in bottled water. I don't remember the companies, I won't say the companies' names, but she was finding it in very standard bottled water, garrafones, liter bottles, etc. Those levels in Jalisco, Durango, Zacatecas, we're seeing fluoride levels that are 3 to 4 times above the allowable limit. We're seeing arsenic levels that are 7 times above the allowable limit in some cases. Just really high levels of arsenic fluoride in the bottled water. Has anybody heard about what's going on with Peñafiel? No. So Peñafiel is a very popular agua, I never drink it. Mineral, thank you, here in Mexico, and they also export it. It's actually owned by Dr. Pepper. And there was a report that came out a few weeks ago by Consumer Reports in the US. It was actually, this is very fresh off the press, this is April.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
What was the result?
We'll get to the results in just a second. Yeah.
You turned away and then I couldn't hear you.
Sorry. I'll try to keep it on you guys. Basically what Consumer Reports did was a big study of bottled water, and Peñafiel came out the worst as far as arsenic levels in the bottled water that was being exported to the US, to the point that they had to shut down all production here in Mexico. So I think it's still shut down. I'm not totally sure if it was just a couple weeks. I don't know specifics, but they're definitely shut down for some time. Dr. Pepper had to shut them down. And the levels they registered were at 18.1. So those are levels we see in urban San Miguel, absolutely coming out of the tap. This again is lower than the Mexican limit technically, but they have a different norm because they are under the 2015 law, which says that they have to be in accordance with the World Health Organization. So they are not under that regulation, or they're not complying with that regulation. Sorry. So just to show you that even things that we think we can trust in, we're seeing that there's arsenic, and something that should it's something we're paying for, should theoretically be treated pretty well. So back to reverse osmosis. So again, I think for a lot of people, especially in the urban zone here where there's a good amount of water access, this is definitely a solution. I should have a picture of actually a reverse osmosis system up there. But you can buy them here in San Miguel at the Don Pedro, get a plumber to install them. They're very effective, and they're actually very easy to check. There's a very simple way to check them. But these really don't work for a big swath of the population for a number of reasons. One, they're very energy intensive. So a lot of the rural communities where we're working in, there just isn't a lot of energy access in the sense of that you can go several days or sometimes in some cases several weeks without electricity. And there's an efficient reverse osmosis system will maybe waste about 85% of the water it produces. That's a lot. We can get into the grand scheme of things later, but it needs a lot of water to produce a little bit of clean water. It's just how it works. Because again, arsenic and fluoride are really difficult to remove. So you need a lot of water to shove it through and well, we don't have to get into the specifics, but you just need a lot of water. So for every liter you produce, you could lose upwards of 5 liters and just that goes down the drain essentially. So in a community like this is Llano Verde, a community we worked in, they have one tap for 17 families in the entire community, and they receive about 5 liters per month per person. Now, each one of those families is paying between 40 and 90 pesos per month for that water right. I don't know what you guys pay here. I pay maybe around 90 pesos a month. I have a lot more access than 5 liters per month. There's another community, San Antonio de Lourdes, where we work. Their well actually went dry because of the overexploitation of the groundwater. At some point, like the water table just dropped and their well couldn't reach that water anymore, and it eventually collapsed in on itself. And there's 120 families there. They have a kindergarten, they have an elementary school. Sorry. And so they actually have to travel to other communities. This is a weird agricultural deposit, and ask for water. And they put them in those big, what we call cubos on the back of their trucks, and they bring them back to the community. And that water also happens to be some of the most contaminated water we ever see in the region, and some of the most expensive because they're going into other communities, they're asking for it, they're routing their trucks, they're spending gas to bring water back into the community. Here's something a little bit closer to home. This is Palo Colorado, which is here in Municipality San Miguel. It's on the road out towards Dolores. It's out by the garbage dump. I don't know if you guys know it. But anyway, it's out there. It's very close to San Miguel. It's a 10-15 minute drive. And we came to the community. We were working on a project with them. They actually had a lot of water access and not a whole lot of contamination, so it was actually kind of hard to organize. They weren't super interested. And then we came back at the beginning of 2018, and we were met with just a huge row entering the community of big 55-gallon drums. We're like, what's going on here? And their well had dried up. Within a span of a couple months, it just went dry and it collapsed in on itself. And so these are 300 families that, like that, pretty much overnight, went from having pretty decent water access 3 days a week, which for this region is very decent in a rural community, to having no water access for now over a year. Okay, so what else can we do then? What can we do for the larger region? So I want to take a step back. This is Mexico City in 2017, underwater. because of massive rains, massive storm systems that came through. This was happening around the world right around the same time, actually. This is the road out towards Guanajuato here in San Miguel from Cieneguita last year. I don't know if anybody's been out on that road, but the bridge collapsed because of all the water. It just came rolling through and knocked over the bridge. We see rivers coming down the streets here during the rainy season, but the national narrative is there's no water. We're running out of water. How are we running out of water if we're literally drowning under it? And it's all about perspective. We look at rainwater as a nuisance. Cities are designed, houses are designed to get rainwater away. Put it into a gutter, put it into a sewage system, and just have it go. Where? I don't know, just away. I just don't want it here. Because we look at it as a nuisance. We don't look at it as a resource. And that's what we're trying to change, and that's what we're trying to show here with these severe water contamination issues and also the severe water scarcity issues. Rainwater kind of solves both of those. Rainwater is really clean. It's distillation. It's natural distillation. We have to put no energy into it. Nature does it for us. And so rainwater comes down really clean and it becomes contaminated with bacteria, which is the easiest thing to remove from the water. We can boil it. We can put it in bottles in the sun. We can get a nice fancy Berkey filter, Niken filter, whatever we want. Almost every single treatment system out there works to remove bacteria, biological pathogens. They don't work to remove arsenic and fluoride, but rainwater doesn't have arsenic and fluoride. It doesn't have pesticides. It doesn't have herbicides. It doesn't have all these other things we could be concerned about. It doesn't have lead.
And it doesn't have any minerals either, so you have to add minerals to it.
Has some minerals, but that's
We need the minerals.
well, about 80% of all of our minerals come from the food we eat. There are definitely minerals that are better absorbed through water, calcium, magnesium, things like that. We can get them from other sources. It's all a balance though. And so if you're gonna be drinking bottled water, reverse osmosis water, it's pretty similar to rainwater. It doesn't have much mineral content either. And so if you wanna have mineral content in your water, you're gonna have to add it in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I dispute your fact about it having no pesticides, because pesticides don't operate. We've had rainwater checked in Australia. It has pesticides.
Sure. Uh-huh.
And the unfortunate thing about rainwater is the clouds move. So your area may be clean, but it may be moving from that heavily sprayed area, and that's what showed up in Australia.
Sure. So there are some specific cases with pesticides, also with in certain industry. It's unlikely in most cases, but you're absolutely right that it is a risk. Again, it's not. We don't see it as huge risk in this region, but the upside of that is that if that is a risk, and that could be a risk in certain areas, you're absolutely right, but you're talking about synthetic organic chemicals. You're not talking about things like arsenic and fluoride. Now, these things are very easy to remove from the water. They're not as easy as bacterias, but you can do it with a pretty simple filter, an activated carbon filter, which is widely available, and it's really inexpensive. And so if that is a risk in your area, a very simple activated carbon filter will deal with most organic chemicals like pesticides and things like that, absolutely. So very good point, thank you. So we get the question all the time about, well, we're in Mexico, it's specifically here, we're in a semi-arid region, there's not enough rain. There's no way there's enough rain, right? And this is national average, it's not huge, 760 millimeters per year of rain. Yes, San Miguel is even lower than that, it's at 565. It's not a lot of rain. And there's a huge dry season too, 8 months long. But here's Tucson, Arizona, 300 millimeters per year. It's a desert. Why am I showing you Tucson, Arizona? Because they're some of the leaders in rainwater harvesting in the world. In fact, most of the leaders in rainwater harvesting in the world live in deserts or live in places that water access is really hard, like in islands and things like that, where it's really hard to treat the water that's available because salinated water? Ocean water is also, you would need some sort of process like reverse osmosis or something like that. So these are the places that we see really aggressive and interesting things going on with rainwater. Tucson, Arizona is the only city, I believe, in the country, in the US, that has rainwater harvesting as part of its building code. It's something we're working on here in San Miguel to be the first in Mexico to have that. And this is something the old director of Conagua for the Valle de Mexico said. Basically just says that there's absolutely enough rain falls in this country to guarantee water for the entire population, without a doubt. And so it's really an infrastructure question. Simple things we can do with rainwater. We can do what's called passive systems, which is really just taking a shovel and moving some dirt around and creating infiltration zones. This is obviously not drinking water. This is just trying to get water to stay here instead of just go away. We use native plants, and we can actually start infiltrating water back into the aquifer more than the really miserable 2% that we're doing right now, if we just kind of change the way we look at this a little bit. This is a big thing for sure, but if we looked at how we do the infrastructure in the city a little bit better, and we start looking at the roadways, which are just designed to get rain out of here as quickly as possible, which is why we're driving up rivers during the rainy season in some of these colonias, right? But if we just changed the way we looked at that a little bit and started moving water into like boulevards here, planting native trees, creating infiltration zones, we wouldn't have the flooding, and we'd also be keeping the water here at the same time. It's a pretty good compromise, if you ask me. So we look at these solutions now. Again, what we work on is really drinking water, so that other stuff is great. It's not our area of expertise by any means. But when we look at rainwater and we look at things like reverse osmosis or bottled water, we look at rainwater with a simple biological treatment step, whatever it may be, we really can get to the same water quality. And again, we might have to put on activated carbon as well or something like that to deal with some specific circumstances. But we can get to a really high level of water quality that I would say is much more, that I have much more confidence in than bottled water at least. So we focus mainly on rural communities. We develop these systems that are very low tech. We work with communities to build these systems. That's what we do. But you can do a lot more with it too. This is a group out of Mexico City, partners of ours, Isla Urbana, who focus on urban development with rainwater systems. They're actually building 100,000 systems with the federal government over the next 6 years for colonias that have very limited water access, because they're like, how do we have limited water access? It's falling on our head. Let's just start capturing it. And it really is simple. It's putting up a few gutters, a few tubes. Most houses already have cisterns on them. You might not even know it, but there's very likely a cistern below your house right now or your apartment, wherever you're at. That's something that exists in, I think, like 70% of all the homes in Mexico, and that's the most expensive part of any rainwater system is storage. If you already got the storage, then we're just talking about capturing it, spending a few hundred pesos a year on some filters, and you're good to go. This is things we can do in restaurants, we can do it in hotels here, having really big rainwater harvesting campaigns specifically for human consumption. Yeah.
When you say we, that doesn't mean you.
What do you mean?
When you say we can get homes to where they can capture, or restaurants to capture, is that part of your services? Is that something we pay you to do?
No, not right now. So we're an NGO and we're focusing more on the work that we do in the communities. It's a good question. It's one we get often, and it's something that we do hope to offer in the future. We're looking towards those models, and it's a process. Okay. We're not quite there by any means.
What was that question?
Services to provide rainwater installation in San Miguel, essentially. And so she's right. I mean, there's, people ask us, well, how do you do it? And there's not a good answer, because there's not a good answer, but we hope to be working on programs like that in the future.
Are there other people who are doing it?
In San Miguel?
Yeah, there's a few. It's relatively simple, really, and so it's something that we want to work with architects on and other people too to make it more standard, but there are a few that we know of, and absolutely, so we can talk later about some names and stuff. I'll just do this briefly just to finish up, but just to show you the actual economic impact we can actually have with this kind of thing, because, well, this is a program we did in a community called Pozo Hondo, which last year, which has some of the highest levels of arsenic and fluoride in the whole region. We worked with, I think, 57 families. These are families that have been working with us and our community partners for years, so they were very aware of the arsenic and fluoride contamination. Their children are living with the impacts of that, and so these families have been buying bottled water for quite a number of years, many of them. So they have their standard household bill from the contaminated well, which is, in this case, 30 to 90 pesos a month, but they also have their bottled water bill. And the average we were seeing with these families is about 3 garrafones a week at 40 pesos in these communities. That's what they're paying. So that's like 6,200 pesos a year in these rural communities, and this is what they're paying for their bottled water. And we never really kind of step back and think about our water bill in this sense, but if we actually look about how we're spending our money on our water, it kind of skews things a little bit. Because in this case, only 10% of their entire water bill goes to the largest quantity of water they receive from the well. 90% goes to 60 liters a week. And a total bill of about 7,000 pesos a year. The national average is not much better. About 55% on average in the entire country of all the money we spend goes towards the lowest usage, which is bottled water in most cases, is what we spend our money on. And the water that comes from the network, from the municipality, is roughly 45%. So we built a bunch of rainwater systems with these families and just did a simple thing, but we could see that we actually lowered their water bill substantially. And now they're investing a lot more in rainwater, but 64% of their water bill now comes from the well. It goes from 10% to 64%, and we switch over to 36% for their rainwater. And when we take that out over time, we can actually see with just these 50 some odd families, that's like 4 million pesos in savings over a 30-year period. And that's pretty concrete, and that's like relatively conservative. Just really quick, I want to end on this, but about what we can do. One last example, since we're talking, the point today was specifically talking about the water quality monitoring program. So last year, the municipal president, the mayor of San Diego de la Union, which is a municipality just north of us here, about an hour away, came to us and asked us if we would test all of their wells. No municipal administration has ever come to us to ask us to test their wells. It's a much poorer municipality. They don't have the infrastructure that they have here in San Miguel, and this mayor had just heard that there's something up with the water. His constituents are telling him that there's problems with the water, and he decided to take action. So he contacted us. We contacted our partners at Texas A&M University and University of Guanajuato, and we studied all the wells. And then he got all of those communities together and allowed us to come in there and talk to them about their water quality. Never seen anybody allow us to do that. And it wasn't good. It was not good at all. Some of the highest fluoride I think we've seen in the region, and a bunch of the communities were above the fluoride level. Can't remember the percentage, but I think it's most of them. Arsenic was also extremely high. Some of them well above, 4 times above the Mexican norm, things like that. 10 times above the World Health Organization limit. But this municipal administration allowed us to go in there and talk openly with the people about their water quality. And he got some really hard questions from them. What are you going to do about it? This is your responsibility. Why did we elect you if this is going on? And he's like, I'm sorry. I didn't know. And he shouldn't know. Well, he should know, but I'm just saying this is not the problem of any given administration. This is decades of bad policy. This is tied to federal departments, to multinational agriculture, tied to a bunch of different things that are out of the control of any sort of municipal administration. But if you can have just a little bit of courage to take that plunge, we can get real information to real people and hopefully create an impact there. And so, unfortunately, he's not there anymore. But on his way out, he started a rainwater harvesting program and built 90 large-scale systems in the most impacted communities in his municipality. It's a small step, but it's a much-needed one in this region. And now we also have a whole municipality that has at least been made aware of what's going on with their water, and some that have actually had solutions installed. So that's where I hope we can go with this on a large level, is kind of accepting the problem and looking towards concrete solutions, because if we don't get the government involved, there's just no way. The problem is way too big to not have any sort of municipal or state support behind it. So I'll leave it there. I just want to just say quickly that we do not do this on our own by any means. We have very close partnerships with all sorts of organizations, grassroots organizations here in the region, throughout the country, the state ecology department, all sorts of different groups we're working with. We have lots of academic partners as well, most specifically Texas A&M, NC State University, and University College of London, who work with us on a variety of different things. This is one program we're talking about today. We have a bunch of other things that we're doing, and we also have a lot of international connections as well to help fund this operation. So I'll leave it for there. Man, I went over again. Okay, well, I'm still here, so if you guys have questions. So, yeah, so here.
So what do you want from us?
What do I want from you? It's a good question. First, I just wanted to inform people. Sorry?
What does he want from us?
What do I want from you? So for us, we're very much in the stage of trying to get the word out. We've been doing this for quite a number of years, and what we keep finding over and over again is that nobody's really aware of what the situation is, or if they are, it's very superficial. And so we're trying to get people to understand what's going on and what solutions you can actually take. So I've got a lot of different things I want you to do. If you go home and just look at your own water situation and change your own water situation that makes a small impact, that's phenomenal. As far as anything grander than that, we're looking for support for our own projects, obviously, but there's a million different things we're looking for. But we're just, I think at the very base level, trying to get people informed about what's going on and then have these kind of larger discussions as we go. Yeah?
You spoke earlier about in San Miguel, all you've been able to do is just use taps.
Yep.
Can you speak a bit about what frustrations are that you're up against in trying to get the government to allow you to get to using the wells and testing the wells? Even though they mix them,
Yeah.
you're not able to get to the heads. Can you speak about that?
We haven't asked this administration yet. The more we go on, the less interested I am in testing the wells in the urban center, to be honest. Because it doesn't tell me what's coming out of the tap, and again, we're much more concerned about the public health implications. So I'm really much more interested in what's coming out of the taps, to be completely honest. That said, we have tried before, and it has been a frustrating process, and we haven't been granted access to the wellheads. I don't want to make that blanket statement about this current municipal government. We're part of a coalition of 13 NGOs that are actively working with both SEPASMA and the direction of the Environment and Sustainability Department to create a water plan for San Miguel. To date, they've been very open, and I'm very hopeful. And so again, administrations change every 3 years, and so it's hard. I don't want to demonize everybody, and I want to give everybody a chance. And right now, we're just getting in the door with them, and so I'd love to give them a chance to work with us. Yeah.
Clearly, because they are mixing the wells, they know that things are no good, that there are problems.
Yeah.
The fact that they're mixing the wells.
Yes. So they've said to us openly that they know. I'm not going to give numbers because I don't remember, but they said that some wells are contaminated. They know that, and that their forecast is it's going to be worse and worse as time goes on, and that's why they're mixing wells. They've said that directly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You mentioned mostly arsenic and fluoride. I've heard that there's other radioactive contaminants in the region, like erionite. I was wondering if you guys test for any of those or see those as an issue in the region.
Okay, so erionite is not a water contaminant. So it's kind of class, I don't know enough about it, but it's kind of more in the class of like asbestos. But it's been found in the dirt, in the soil, in one specific area in the municipality of San Miguel, a community called Tierra Blanca. And they do think that it's been tied to a very specific form of cancer that's tied to erionite. We don't see that as a risk for anywhere else except for that. The very little I know about it is that there's been a few cases around the world with erionite, and it's a very rare thing, and it's a very concentrated thing, and it's impacted this community, I think, very devastatingly. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's in inhalation, especially like they found it in a road that kids walk to on school, and they have a very high instance, like the number one cause of death in the community was this weird type of lung cancer. I can't remember the name of it. It's in the municipality, it's in a community called Tierra Blanca. It's out towards the road to Guanajuato, and then you have to go into the communities there, but it really is only impacting that community, and it's just through inhalation in the air as far as we know. And the government did act on that, and they were trying to move the community. They didn't want to move. There's a bunch of different, political issues with it, but as far as we know, that it's a very specific case that isn't really anything anybody could have planned for. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, that's the
Was there another question? Sorry, I can't. Okay, yeah.
I recently met somebody who's lived here for 30 years, and she said that when she came here, the scientists, if there were scientists here then, I don't know, were saying that San Miguel would run out of water in 12 years, and it didn't happen. So she doesn't buy into all this, what's happening today, that we're depleting the aquifer faster than it's getting replenished. She said with all this development, they wouldn't be developing unless they knew there was going to be water. What do I say to something like that?
Well, I think absolutely no, and I think there's an important point there because a lot of people will tell you things like that, and I won't. I won't tell you how much time is left. I don't know, because people are saying Querétaro is the fastest growing city in the country, huge industrial zone, and they're using tons of water. They were saying 20 years ago in Querétaro that there's only 10 years of water left. They still have water, and they're expanding more than they ever have before. And what they're doing is their wells are now over a kilometer deep. I mean, we're going really, really deep, right? And they're still finding water. So the question is for here, I don't know where the bottom is. Nobody really knows where the bottom is. It's a really hard thing to study. It's very possible that we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. What's going to happen is that it's going to be an incredible cost. Pumping water from a kilometer deep is very expensive. And on top of it, it's going to be, the water quality is going to continue to diminish. It's going to continue to be laden with much higher concentrations of different metals and minerals and things like that. So all I can say is that I know for a fact...
Is it necessarily true that there are more metals the deeper you go? Maybe there would be less?
Yeah, I mean, it's the main theory. There's a bunch of different theories for all the different mechanisms of why we're seeing arsenic rise and things like that. But generally speaking, like, yes, the deeper we go, we're going to have much more ancient fossil water, much more mineral laden. It's going to be a much worse water quality. And most people, even municipal governments, agree on that. And so we're going to have to go deeper, absolutely. And it's going to be a huge cost. It's going to be massive. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars to drill wells that deep. So will San Miguel do it? I don't know, probably. I mean, we were with Sabasma and they're talking about it's going to be way cheaper to take it from a presa, 200 kilometers away. These aren't easy solutions. But I think answering it like that, like, it's absolutely well known, and it's published from the State Water Commission that the water tables are dropping, and they're dropping. Their numbers are 30% overexploitation and 2 to 4 meters per year, which is insane. It's probably even much higher than that. I'm just using those numbers because they're so high, I don't even have to go higher to exaggerate it. And that's known at the federal level. And so to say that they're not being depleted is just wrong. They are, yeah. Yep.
Is there only one aquifer underlying the entire watershed? Are there multiple ones that are all hydrogeologically connected? Has it been studied extensively enough to know that?
It hasn't been studied extensively enough to know that, and I should probably just end it on that. There's a lot, it depends on who you talk to. If you talk to the federal government, this watershed is actually separated into technically 2 watersheds and 3 different aquifers. There's no real basis for that. We haven't seen any studies that really show where they come to those conclusions. 5 to 10 years ago, it was even more different. It was like 5 different watersheds and however many different aquifers. So it changes all the time. So there's a political component and there's a scientific component. The scientific component is very difficult to study.
Is the low recharge rate because of permeable levels in the stratigraphy, so that anything we do at the surface won't have much impact, or is the Vado zone very permeable so water can get down? There's
lots of impermeable zones throughout the watershed. Specifically in the north, there's underground very impermeable layers that we know of. There's actually a new theory here in San Miguel that San Miguel is actually very permeable, that this zone actually might be much more permeable. And so it just hasn't been studied enough. I'm using kind of general numbers here. We know that infiltration could be much higher, and that we think that maybe San Miguel would be a better place to do that than further north in the watershed. But there's not enough studies really.
It sounds like the only thing we know for certain is that harvesting rainwater, particularly for use in agriculture, would be a good long-term approach. We don't know enough about permeability in the stratigraphy to know whether we can do much on the recharge side of it.
Yeah, I mean, the agriculture needs to change fundamentally. We can't keep producing these really water-intensive export crops. They don't have enough mechanisms to do it with rainwater. They need to extract groundwater for that. If we're going to talk about that, we need to talk seriously about closing down wells and changing the kind of production we do in this zone. We should not be producing the kind of things we are here. Guanajuato is like the 2nd largest exporter in the world of broccoli. Really pretty high water intensive crop. It should not be produced here. So let me go back here. I think you had your hand up a bunch. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Going on with what you were saying about the agricultural industry, it seems like, they're using more water than anyone else.
Yep.
So who is working politically with them to try to get them to change maybe their methods of using water, and if they can't talk nicely to them, can they legally sue them to get them to change what they're doing? Because they are responsible, it seems, by what you're saying, for the depletion of the water. Is that not true?
Technically true, yeah. How they're allowed to do it is another question, right? And so it's a really complex question. It's a really important question. So I'll say, first of all, it's a really big industry with a lot of really powerful people, and it's something that we as a small organization don't particularly want to wrestle with. Yes, there are regulations put in place, but it's a broken system. It's a completely broken system. So for instance, in the state of Guanajuato, we have 18,000 registered wells. There is only one entity that can actually enforce the concessions of those wells, and that's CONAGUA. That's the Federal Water Authority. They have 10 inspectors for the entire state of Guanajuato to be looking at 18,000 wells. And it's actually more than that. Those are the registered wells. Now, on top of that, you don't actually pay for water in Mexico. Water is the right of the people. So you pay for the service of water. So they can actually charge you for water. And so agricultural producers don't actually pay for water. Industry is a different animal. Industry does have to pay for water. So they do pay for their water use, and they pay it to CONAGUA or the state authority or whatever it is, it depends. And so it's really the industrial users of water that are footing the bill for CONAGUA, for the Federal Water Authority. But most of the wells are agricultural, but they don't pay that bill. So CONAGUA is focusing their really limited resources, which again is literally 10 inspectors for 18,000 wells, on industrial users of water because that's where they get their budget from. And so they really don't have an interest in enforcing concessions on an agricultural producer. I mean, they just don't. And whose fault is that? I think it's the entire system's broken, and we have to look at it from a really higher level systemic analysis there.
Are all agricultural systems, all agricultural growers falling under the right of the water, the right of the people to have water?
Yeah, as far as I know, yeah.
Can any of them be classified as industry, since some of them are very
No.
large growers?
No, as far as I know, no. Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to cisterns, you
Okay.
mentioned that many of the houses already had them.
Yes.
Had them because they used to build them with cisterns.
Yeah, most houses, like the reason that you always have water in San Miguel is not because you always have water. The way it works here is that most houses have a cistern under them because they can't actually give you water every day, but you just don't know it. So what they do is that it's just you're tied into the network on your cistern, that fills up automatically, and then you can go 2 days a week without having water go in that cistern. You don't even know it because you've got a huge storage of that water.
Isn't it those things in the top?
It's usually an underground cistern that's then pumped up to the roof. Now some have a direct line up to the roof, and then you might notice it more, but it depends. So
Those cisterns don't collect rainwater.
no, but they could very easily. In about
And you don't do that.
no, sorry, not right now.
But you could supply instruction for people to do that?
Yeah, we have a lot of resources available. We've created a lot of different materials on how to build rainwater systems. There's a lot of good. So Isla Urbana is ahead of the game. They're in Mexico City. They've got commercial products and all sorts of things on building rainwater systems, specifically for urban developments. They have these things that you can put onto your house really, really easily. They have kits you can buy online, a whole bunch of information.
So maybe it would be a good thing to make all new construction mandatory.
So that's a very good point. And so again, we're part of this coalition that's working with municipal government right now. We have two things that we're pushing through right now. One is a water fund that would actually be payment for ecosystem services, which is a global model on how you can kind of fund rehabilitation and all sorts of other things. It'd be a voluntary thing, but it'd be tied to SEPASMA, essentially that a portion of the money goes into this independent fund that has municipal people on it, but also has the citizenry and other people who manage that fund. And the other is changes to the municipal construction code. So we're working right now. We made a recommendation. It's going to be published in the Intención, I hope, next week. But we made a recommendation. We were asked by the municipal government to make it. And the recommendation essentially is that they're working on the new municipal code right now. It's the PME Duet. Well, that's the whole plan, but there's a construction code within that, and we're trying to get them to be the very first to require, only on new construction right now, but to require rainwater harvesting. So every new construction, if it goes through, who knows, but every new construction would be required to submit a rainwater harvesting plan for both passive and active systems, and they would be required to capture a certain cubic meter of rainwater per square meter of roof space that they build.
And then there's rainwater systems.
Yeah, we're going step by step, but yeah, for sure.
When I lived in California back in the 90s, it was forbidden to do that. Because they said that, so part of it, say, whatever rainwater you collect in the cistern doesn't go into the ground.
Exactly.
So
So,
that's,
if this ever takes off on a larger level, that will be an issue because our watershed, our aquifer is part of the Lerma Chapala, which is probably the most important socioeconomic region of all of Mexico. It's 38, I think, joined underground aquifers. And if we start taking out a lot of rainwater, because all that water is eventually going to the Lerma Chapala, it's not going into our aquifer, but it's going into the larger. And the Lerma Chapala board is not going to be super happy about that at some point, but we're a long way off from that right now. Yeah?
I had a question about water filtration. We were talking about reverse osmosis.
Yep.
So you had mentioned the Berkey water filtration system, which I have. And when you order from them, you can order extra filters for
Yep.
arsenic specifically,
Yeah.
which I've done. And I checked their test results and it all sounds really good. But what you're saying is that when you test here, is that accurate that when you test here, even with extra filters in that system, it doesn't work in the way that their test results say that it does? Is that
Correct.
accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. And so I can tell you why really quickly. So these systems are certified under laboratory conditions, almost exclusively. What that means is that if you want to say this removes fluoride, is you take a bunch of distilled water that has no mineral content, you throw a bunch of fluoride in there, and then you pass it through your filter. And it removes all the fluoride, and you can get an absorption capacity based off of that. That's how they do it. Now, in practice, that means nothing to me because we have a whole bunch of other stuff in our water. We have all these what we call competing ions. The water chemistry is very diverse. And so when you put something in there to remove fluoride, it's also going to start absorbing other things too that are attracted to it. And so it's going to be competing with fluoride and other things. And fluoride is almost, for some reason, it's really hard to absorb. It's almost always the last thing to get on there. And so when you put our water quality in there that has a bunch of things going against it. So it's got a lot of fluoride, but it's also got a lot of other things in it that are going to compete for those different adsorption spots on the media. And you have a very high pH in our water, which has also been shown, again, what they're using in the Berkey specifically is activated alumina, and that has a very low absorption capacity at the pHs that we have. And they'll readily say that their system works substantially better at a low pH, which we don't have here.
Okay,
So
would you say in terms of arsenic and fluoride, you're better off using a Gar foam than you are a Berkey filtration system?
Oh, absolutely.
You are, okay.
I would say bottled water or reverse osmosis.
Okay.
what pH is rainwater?
Rainwater is a low pH usually. So rainwater is usually at 5.5.
So if I collect rainwater and then pass it through the Berkey, good?
Sure, but it's not necessary. Rainwater won't have fluoride in it.
Because it depends on I'm probably going to be collecting it from the roof.
Yeah, I mean, so it'll remove all I'm just saying it won't matter because you won't have arsenic and fluoride in the water anyway because rainwater will already not have arsenic and fluoride. What the Berkey will do is make it potable in the sense of removing any sort of biological. Yeah, absolutely. But for that, the pH doesn't really matter because that's just biological. Yeah?
Well, I mean, this is presentation about with agriculture using so much volume of water that is based on arsenic and fluoride. I'm imagining mostly agriculture is GMO. What health effects does it have on the produce?
It's a very good question. Great question. Yeah, we don't know. We know that so arsenic and fluoride are both not very well absorbed through food. And so even if it is laden in the vegetables or whatever you're producing, it's probably not going to be absorbed very well. I can't remember the numbers, but it could be a health risk if it's really high levels. It's hard to say. But plants are also very resilient. So some plants can completely kind of like deactivate some of these minerals and metals. And so it really depends. And there just aren't enough studies. Like you really need, like we don't know enough right now. So we do know that there are laws for export or import into the US, for instance, that farmers have to be irrigating with potable water, which is kind of crazy, but they do. And we know that these farmers are submitting reports in some cases 3 to 4 times a year to authorities in the US, I think the FDA, I'm not totally sure on that one, with their water quality results of the water they're using. And those reports, if they're exporting, are showing that they don't have arsenic and fluoride above limits in their water. We know for a fact that's almost certainly not true. But again, this is a broken system where you can probably get away with doing a bunch of different things.
Meanwhile, in California, watering with the runoff from the fracking water.
Yeah.
That's not potable.
Yes.
So you mentioned briefly that some of the water from some of the companies that sell us developed homes can have elevated levels.
But they do often.
Yeah. So are we at risk? I mean, we don't have a lot of options here necessarily. It's all pretty
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so we did some work a while ago, and there's one plant here in San Miguel that they have their plant here in San Miguel called Mariner. We've been to their plant. We've spoken with the owner several times. We've seen their operation. We've tested their water several times. I am completely confident in their operation. We were very blown away by what they're doing over there. They do spot checks, I think 8 or 12 times a day or something. I know they have a couple different products. They're all fine. Like they're all Mariner.
Sorry?
Mariner.
Yeah.
And the only reason we recommend them is because they're in San Miguel. We've been there, so we know where the water's coming from. The owner knew all about the arsenic fluoride issues, and he was very, very well versed in everything. So we were very impressed with him. The other bottled water plants, so most of the other ones, they come from Celaya or they come from Querétaro, and we can't monitor that. I mean, you can go day by day and have a different water quality in those, and so it's really, really hard to monitor. So that's why we would recommend them. Yeah.
So do they? I've never seen their trucks, but do they exist here? So you can go there?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on. They're like behind the Mega. They're on the Salida to Celaya, and they do delivery and everything too. I don't have the number, sorry, but yeah.
For those of us who are pet owners,
Pet owners, yeah.
for those of us who are pet owners of dogs and
Yeah.
cats, this is a very important question. Can we give them tap water?
Again, a very good question. I don't have a good answer to. I don't know. It's one of those things that we just, we know, for instance, dogs can take a lot of things that we can't take. I would say almost, I don't want to say anything certainly. I would just say that we know that arsenic specifically has a very detrimental impact on the human organism. I don't have enough information to really say. All I can say is I don't give my dog tap water.
You don't.
I don't.
And what's a follow-up question? What's in that container you're drinking?
This right now is reverse osmosis water. It should be rainwater. It's not always rainwater, but right now it's reverse osmosis. And I've got another 2 liters here. I always have. Yes.
It's kind of a silly question. Would it be possible for me to store water in? I have a little fountain in my backyard. Could I store water in that? Right?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know how big it is. I mean, I don't know how long it'll last you, but.
Could I build it up so that it was a little bit higher?
Yeah, I would need to see more. I'm assuming you could. I mean, get a good contractor. I'm sure you could do. Yeah, I mean, it'd be building a cistern. Yeah, back to.
Do you have a list of contractors who do the reverse osmosis?
Yeah, no. We've been working on it. Unfortunately, we've had some bad experiences with some plumbers on that kind of stuff. So we used to have some names, and now we're not super confident in them. One was overcharging people, like really excessively. Another one, like for instance, a reverse osmosis system, just it's a membrane. And what you're doing is you're pushing water through at a very high pressure and through tiny pores, like molecules wide. So that water gets through and all the dissolved ions kind of stay on the surface. That takes time. It's a hard process to do. And one of our experiences was a plumber who installed it, and the woman of the house was complaining that it was taking too long to filter, which is what reverse osmosis, it takes a while. That's why you have a separate tank that gets filled up with reverse osmosis. So the plumber came and he put a big hole in the membrane. So we've struggled with a lot of things like that, and so we do hope to have better information. If anybody knows of good plumbers, of good contractors, if you've had a good experience, we'd love to hear about it. We do hope in the future to do things like certification programs and stuff like that. It's not number one on our list, and that's why we look to you guys for help on that kind of stuff of who's gone in. So for instance, if you find someone to install a reverse osmosis system, the great thing is it's really easy to check. We don't have to do a full arsenic and fluoride test. We can use a very simple meter. It takes 3 seconds, and we can tell you right away whether or not it was installed correctly. And that's a very simple test we can do. And so if you do get someone to install it, we can test it for you without a doubt and make sure it's working right. And then that'll be good information for us to recommend people in the future. But as it stands right now, we can give you a couple names, but I don't have a whole lot of good information for you. It's pretty easy to install though. So back in the back, you had your head up for a while there, sorry.
Thank you. I'd like to mention something that nobody's mentioned, conserve water. And when I was living in Whittier, California, which is outside of Los Angeles, several years ago, my two granddaughters and my daughter-in-law moved in with me for a year while my son was working out of town. And I ran a little experiment on my own on how people brush their teeth. Leaving the water running while they brush their teeth, leaving the water on constantly while they're showering. So I advised my family, I said, let's do a little test among ourselves. Let's get a little plastic container, fill it up, you can reach a toothbrush, turn the water off, and here's how we're going to shower. We're going to soak, turn it off, lather, turn it on, take it off. And it saved me about 40% of my water bill. And with two, a 7 and 8 year old, my daughter-in-law, and myself, we had 3 bathrooms, 3 showers. So we were constantly using water. And that's what I did to conserve water because we were in a drought at that time in Southern California. And if you can answer this for me, which bottled water is best for me?
Again, it was this Marinier is the one that we would recommend here in San Miguel. What is it, sorry? Marnier? Marnier, sorry. And I'll also say that we've done very limited bottled water testing here, but we've never seen any issues in any bottled water here in San Miguel. So again, super limited, but we haven't seen any issues. No, thank you. Thank you all.